Yo, what's up guys? Welcome to ESA Winter. I am Drakodan. This is going to be Boktai 2 Boy Django for the Game Boy Advance. I am, however, playing it on a DS, as you can see. So, if you're completely unfamiliar with this series, the main gimmick is that on the GBA cartridge, we've got here a nice little semiconductor photon diode, which is a very flashy way of saying this is a solar panel. This detects UV radiation. You're intended to play this game outdoors and use the power of the real sun. However, that's not super practical. They wouldn't let me play outdoors and follow me around with a camera. So we're instead making do with a UV flashlight, which you can use to emit real UV radiation. However, it is real UV radiation like sunlight. It is potentially dangerous in large doses, so I am wearing sunscreen on my hands, and I'm also wearing UV protection glasses, and I've also got the DS lid tilted down to help mitigate the reflection of the UV rays coming into the room and towards my face. So, safety first. Like, this is a potentially dangerous game to play for long stretches of time. I did a lot of practice on emulator, but I think for a marathon showcase, you got to do the real hardware setup. It's just a very nice showcase of technical specs and the ability of the cartridge. So starting with putting in a password here, which is going to let me start with slightly higher stats and a slightly larger inventory, and we're also going to start with a one-character name. And I am ready to go whenever tech is. So, oh, I heard. Hold up. Yo. All right. So I'm going to give a countdown, and I believe this is the magic button that makes it all happen. So we're going to get started in 3, 2, 1, go. So, Boktai 2, I imagine a lot of people have probably not seen this series before. If you are not familiar with this game series, it plays most similarly to Metal Gear Solid. This is a Konami game, and this series was developed by Kojima, so there are a lot of very quirky, idiosyncratic things that appear in this game. There's just a lot of really cool mechanics that make this a really interesting speedrun, but you'll see it plays kind of similarly to a Metal Gear Solid. There's a bit of stealth, there's a lot of action, and there's some story as well. There's some story about some Doomsday Prophecy stuff that's gone on, and as soon as I gain control, I'm going to set the text speed to fast. This costs a few seconds to do, but saves frames across every other text box in the game, so it does save some net time. I'm also playing at night. You can see this, it's not just dark in-game for no reason. I'm currently playing at nighttime, and I'm playing on the date of a real-life lunar full moon. You do need your lunar calendar to be able to run this game, because if you play on a real full moon date at night, you can use not only the power of the sun, but also the power of the moon to gain infinite health refills whenever you need it, as long as the sun is not out in-game. So we run through this little tutorial section, we run into this mysterious vampire, who's going to immediately attack us and steal Django's solar gun, the Gun del Sol. This is our weapon for fighting vampires. And Otenko, the sunflower here, is like, well, it's fine because only our bloodline can use it. But then the vampire uses it and knocks us out and runs away with it. So we are completely defenseless and completely weaponless against the hordes of the undead now, which is less than ideal to be running around trying to fight the undead with nothing but your bare hands, but we'll deal with it for now. And there's some plot that's going to come on here, like we're going towards the Solar City, San Miguel, where there's some stuff going down, and like seals are weakening, immortals are awakening, like kind of video gamey anime stuff, you know? Here's some dark characters who are plotting nefarious stuff, but we get some nice scaling sprites here. Looks lovely. And we're going to come into the first instance of the game where we're going to be using a little bit of stealth to bypass a couple of enemies, and also our first real action sequence where we're going to actually pick up a weapon, because like I say, using your bare hands to fight the undead is less than ideal. Using traditional weapons to fight the undead is also less than ideal, but it's better than just having your bare hands. So just going to avoid that zombie there and come into this room where we're going to get trapped with a skeleton. If you try to fight the skeleton with your bare hands, Otenko is like, nah, dude, just don't bother, just go and find a weapon. So we're going to go into this room where we're going to find a chest which contains a sword, the Gladius. So now we actually have a weapon, and Otenko's like, well, that's better than nothing, I guess, so go and deal with it. So I'm going to get behind the skeleton and attack it in a certain way, to force it to turn around and then go into its blind spot as it's turning around. You can end up at the door as it gets destroyed. The skeleton is only incapacitated though. Otenko's explaining about leveling up and getting stats, but also that like, the undead don't stay dead forever if you don't vanquish them with the sunlight. So again, it's a big problem. It's less than ideal that we don't have the sun right now. Also picking up an armor, and I'm going to take my armor off So this is kind of like the quote-unquote Dark Souls element of playing this game, that you want to take your armor off as soon as possible and play defenseless. Your movement speed in this game is one of 8 speeds, and it's a product of your agility stat minus your weight stat. So we hit this ghoul 3 times for 0 damage, and then the Sunflower Girl, Zazie, shows up, and she's like, alright dude, let me level with you. This is not going to work, you can't fight like this, so I'm going to hook you up. So she gives us this glove, the Sol Device, which I believe is actually Latin for in place of the sun, which is a nice play on words, because that's the role that it literally plays in the game. It takes the place of the sun for powering your attacks. And even the ghoul's like, what the hell is going on? So she gives us our first enchantment. The Soul Device lets you enchant your weapons with elements, so we get Enchant Sol. So now we can use the power of the sun in our physical weapons, and we're absolutely going to melt through this thing. Damage boost through it and hit it from behind, and it just dies in 2 hits very easily. So we get some more dialogue, like little bits of like tutorial bit. We don't really care, we're just going to carry on. There's one ghoul on the screen that I'm going to fight before advancing. It's just directly in my path, so it's a very quick and easy source of experience. 4 hits in the back and it deals with it very easily. And we're going to get into the city of San Miguel here, where we're going to meet some more NPCs, get some more plot, which we can't read unless you're fluent in Japanese. But basically, like, stuff's going down. Like, people are going missing from the town. The cathedral near the town is a source of undead activity right now, and the blacksmith has gone to investigate but hasn't come back. And there's talk of a doomsday beast potentially awakening. Like, the plot of this game is that the family of 4 immortals, Boktai, White Dunir, Red Durathror, and Blue Dvalin, who are the 4 stags in Norse mythology that nibble at the world tree Yggdrasil, they're trying to awaken what's called the Ancestor Piece, which is a primordial being that's sleeping underneath the city of San Miguel. It's like, it's not living, dead, or undead, it's simply an eternal being that just always is. So even the immortals are terrified of it, but they believe that it will help them destroy the world, as it's just this primordial, unstoppable entity. So they're trying to unlock seals that will allow it to awaken and devour the world, essentially. So now we're going to get our second elemental enhancement, Flame Enchant, which is more of a puzzle-solving element rather than straight combat, but it does get used a little bit. So I'm going to turn the lamp on for the first time here. We now have solar power, but I'm not holding the DS in the light stream quite yet. Well, okay, now I am, because there's rain in the game, and we can use the sun to dispel the rain. However, coming into the next couple of screens, I am going to want the sun off, because there's a couple more ghouls I'm going to want to kill for experience, and if the ghouls die to sun exposure, you do not get the experience from it. You do need to land the killing blows yourself. So there's going to be this ghoul here. And then there's going to be 2 more ghouls once we get into the cathedral. And then after the second ghoul, I'm going to get a level up, and I'm going to start allocating my stat points for the first time. There we go. So I'm going to put my strength up to 13 and my agility up to 17. At 17 agility, I'm going to have increased movement speed. So from taking off the armor, I went up in movement speed, and from raising agility to 17, I'm moving even faster now. The previous route for any percent just boosted strength from the start of the game, since you'd think, well, boosting strength and killing stuff faster does save time, but it turns out that moving faster saves even more time than that, to the tune of about 15 seconds at the start of the game, even when it makes encounters take slightly longer because you're hitting them for slightly less. So we need to get inside the cathedral, and there's that cat there, Nero, that's trying to show us where to go, but we can't get inside the cathedral as the front door is locked, so we're going to have to get a bit creative and figure out how to get in from other avenues. Also, if you want to play this game even casually, you've got to do a lot of block pushing. There's a lot of puzzles in this game, and a lot of them take the form of block pushing puzzles. So we're going to get our second weapon here, the club. There's swords, hammers, and spears in this game. For combat, I'm almost always going to be using swords, but hammers and spears are very useful for puzzle solving. Keeping the sun off in this room so I can get this one kill. So you hear, as soon as I put the sun back on, there's another ghoul that just fizzles out as soon as it's exposed to the sun, but I don't get experience for that one. Picking up an item here, which I'm going to save for later. And we're just going to do a little bit more puzzle solving, going into a graveyard and pushing a certain set of tombstones to unlock the way forward, whilst avoiding the dog that's inside the graveyard. It's grossly overpowered for this point of the game, and if you aggro the dog, you die extremely quickly, so I'm not going to do that. However, the next section of the game is going to mostly speak for itself. I'm just going to kill a few ghouls underground for some EXP and solve some puzzles. So, Huds, if there's anything you want to chip in with, now is a very good time.
Thank you very much, Draco. Yes, we've had a $30 donation from Prof9. Says, great to see Boktai run on the big stage. Good luck with the run, Draco, and remember, the sun will rise tomorrow.
The sun will rise again tomorrow. Thank you very much, Prof. Alright, so we're underground. Push a block onto a switch to reveal the way forward, and I'm going to need to kill a few ghouls here for experience. Hitting stuff from behind does deal extra damage and also stuns enemies for a brief period, which makes them a lot easier to crowd control. I'm going to skip that one ghoul in the corner. Now, the bats in this screen are RNG with where they spawn. Thankfully, that was pretty friendly. The two bats in the corner did not aggro because I didn't get close enough. I'm going to knock on the wall here to distract this ghoul, so that it moves forward and doesn't see me, even though I passed right in front of it. The ghouls are, like, blind in this game. It really is like MGS AI if you were playing on, like, very easy in MGS, where they can barely see, like, 5 feet in front of their faces. So get more block pushing here. Gonna need to simultaneously reach this lamp to unlock the door, but also get across to where the door is. So gonna need to push these 2 blocks into this position so that I can access the lamp. Now in the next room, I'm going to need to light 2 torches and then interact with the switch before they go out. So switch to hammer, so I can do that. Once you get access to more elements and weapon types in this game, the menuing gets actually pretty involved with using select to change your enchantment and weapon type. Like, it's quite easy to make menuing mistakes and lose like little incremental bits of time as you're going through. So for this puzzle, I'm just going to need to hit these 2 switches as I'm ascending. The timing is pretty nice, though, with how the just the timing of the hammer swing itself works out. So it's pretty elementary. So switching back to sword and soul when we go into the cathedral. So we're finally indoors. Finally inside the cathedral. And we're finally going to start figuring out what's what. So we have a bit of a look around, and we go into the main lobby, and we're going to immediately walk into a trap. We're also going to see where we're supposed to be going. So here's Nero again, trying to guide us towards the basement, which is where the immortal is. But the basement disappears, and we see this floor mural, which also disappears. So the main puzzle of the cathedral is that that staircase will not reappear until we reassemble the floor mural, which I need to find 4 colored crystals and place them in specific spots to make that mural appear again. But before that, I need to take care of this trap with 3 skeletons. I'm going to use the same trick as before, where I'm going to hit them from behind and then walk into the blind spots. And I'm going to be trying to, again, hit them from behind. But with this 3rd skeleton, tell me exactly how I'm hitting this thing from behind. Like, that's... I know it's an isometric view, but that's not really how perspective works. The game doesn't really care if you're physically behind an enemy. It just cares if you're facing the same direction as the enemy. That's how it judges if you're hitting from behind. And since the hitbox of the sword is so generous, you can hit it, like, from the front and still be considered hitting it from behind, which is pretty nice. So I'm going to knock on the wall here to distract this ghoul. It's going to come and investigate, and it's going to walk over that floor panel to unlock the door at the end. Going to light this torch here with flame and sword and switch to hammer for this next little bit. I need to destroy these 2 blocks on the right and push this block in the hole and do a bit more block destruction to reach a key so that I can go a little bit deeper into the dungeon. And we've already found the first orb for the floor mural, the yellow orb, which I was almost on the magic pixel there, where I didn't need to move in the cutscene. I don't think it saves time, but I want to land on it at some point. That'll be really nice. So placing the yellow orb, and it's going to reveal the floor mural. I'm also turning the UV light back on here, where I'm going to need to recharge energy before I leave the room. So you have these skylights, which you can use to Taio and restore some energy. So getting full sun exposure in this game is actually very difficult. Like, if you go physically outdoors on a really, like, blazing clear day, you probably will not get 10 sun on the solar bar. It's very difficult to get this. It's really only possible by, like, spoofing the sun sensor with a strong source of UV, as I am now. Also, in the room I was before, I was checking one specific position for another chest, but didn't get it, so we'll deal with it after this trap. Gonna level up on this ghoul and put 3 more strength points in, so that we can deal with these remaining ones a bit more quickly. And we had 1 pickup from this ghoul here. What is it gonna be? It's trash pickup. So enemies have two different drop tables. They can drop common or rare items. The common items are about 10% and the rare items are about 1%. I really wanted to see a rare drop from that ghoul, as they can drop swords, which will be used later as a crafting material to mitigate some RNG, but sadly not that lucky. We also just picked up the spear, which is our third weapon type and is very good for puzzle solving. As you can see, you can use it to hit things that are far away. I'm going to switch to flame and hammer here, and I'm going to do a little trick as we go up this staircase here, where I'm going to trigger a trapdoor by walking over the corner, then use the timing of hitting that torch so that we can go over the trapdoor as it's closing to take a slightly shorter path through this room. And interacting with that hint panel in the corner is necessary to do a puzzle later in the dungeon. I'm going to turn spear and flame on here and turn the light back on so that I have access to sunlight. I'm going to pass through this room again, and I'm going to need to check about 18 different spots in my periphery as I'm passing through this room. And I do see the red crystal. Okay, that's pretty convenient that it's, so you can see it glinting here in the corner. So that can be in like 18 different spots in that room. And you need to be able to like check them all as you're passing through. Thankfully, it was in a spot that I could just see in the cutscene there. There's only one extra visit that I take through that room, so on the next backtrack, I would have needed to find that red crystal before I left the room. The best case scenario is that the first time you go through, you just see it in the set of skylights that are next to the staircase that I took up towards the second trap, but that's a very low chance for that to happen. Now that I have the spear, I can destroy these two statues to reveal the location of the blue crystal. And my health is a little low here, but it's fine as long as I'm careful in the library, which is the next room I'm going to go through. So just going to pick up the blue crystal. I'm going to go back indoors. My energy is also going to get back to 100% just before I go back indoors at this pace. It's nice. Nice to get a bit of passive regeneration without needing to stop and manually regenerate. So once I wall talk here, I'm just going to turn the light off again. I try to minimize my exposure to the light if I don't need it, because again, the potential health risks of like long-term full UV exposure, like it's a real thing that we try to mitigate while playing this game. Ideally, you know, just play an emulator, just use like the patched ROM where you can manually control the sun level and then you don't actually have a source of UV constantly near your body. That's the best thing to do, potentially. Also, if you want to like optimize for pure time, the way that I'm playing on DS right now, this is not ideal, because GBA games run at 59.7275 frames per second. The DS in GBA mode runs games at 59.6555 FPS. So the TLDR of that is that for every roughly 10 minutes of gameplay, you lose about a second because of the slightly lower frame rate. But for this game in particular, the portability of the DS and being able to control your level of sun exposure is just very handy. Like, runners tend to opt to play on Game Boy Player, but that presents its own challenges with using the solar sensor, and you have to like construct a frame to hold the light and stuff like that. I just prefer the setup of being able to control where the console is. So one more block pushing puzzle here where we need to light up these lamps. And we're going to unlock the door at the end, but I'm going to take a couple of chests before I leave this room. And now I'm going to use the spear to take care of these torches as I'm passing by. And this room more or less speaks for itself, and it's a pretty long little puzzle solving sequence. So Huds, if you've got any messages, now is a very nice time.
Yeah, just say I'm in awe of your explanation of this game at the moment. It's incredible. We do have an open target at the moment for Open Tiger, the bonus chart super emulator. We're at $1,097 of the $1,500 needed to meet that one. So do please get your donations in. Use !donate in the chat. Make sure you're putting it to that target. Let's get that one met for later on today.
Thank you very much, dude. Right, so we're going to push this block onto this switch so that we can access the colored lamp. And that will reveal where the final crystal is, the green crystal, and then we can finally start putting these in the right places so we can actually access the basement and get to the immortal that's in the basement. So I can start talking about the upcoming boss fight. So I mentioned there's the 4 immortals that are like color-coded and they're named after stags in Norse mythology. So we're going to be fighting White Daenerys, and she is going to take the form of a moth that flies around the room and tries to attack you from an airborne position and drops larvae to like harass you. But there's going to be a torch in the center of the room, which we can use spear and flame to light up, and attract her to investigate the torch. She comes down to ground level unless you get a few hits in. Getting central hits on the torch to get her down in one thrust is extremely precise. but it is nonetheless the fastest way to do it, so that's something I'm going to be aiming to do. And energy is pretty strictly rationed through the fight. If you miss too many hits, you like have to take a refill, which is not ideal, so going to be obviously trying not to miss too many hits. It also wastes a couple of seconds every time you miss a central thrust because she does a longer attack cycle. I'm going to turn the light on here, but I'm going to only try and refill life instead of energy when I come to the next skylights, because there's going to be a solar station before I get into the Daenerys boss fight, and recharging on a solar station is always faster than recharging manually via Tayo. So yeah, cheers, thanks. So we get the floor mural here, and we finally get the stairs to the basement, so we can finally get down there, find the Immortal, and figure out what's going on. I say figure out what's going on, it's going to be a boss fight and then some story. It squeeze a little bit more sun regeneration going through those skylights. It's just a bit of passive. It slightly reduces the number of frames I need to spend on the solar station. Gonna re-equip Spear as we're going through here and turn off the sun. I'm not going to need it until after Daenerys. So I'm going to recharge on the solar station here, and I'm going to put on my armor before going into the boss fight. Movement speed is not super important during this boss fight, however, mitigating incoming damage really is. Even with the armor on, if I take too many hits, it's pretty easy to actually die in this fight. Now this is kinda sort of serious time, so I'm going to knuckle down and try and make sure I get these central hits here. That's a miss, so 2 misses, wow. So yeah, every time she does this like chloroform attack, chlorophyll attack, whatever, that wastes a few seconds. That's another miss. So yeah, you can see it's very precise to hit all 4 of these. So now that she's under half health, she's going to do a dive bombing attack. Also, whenever there's downtime, I'm trying to deal with these lava. Oh, that's unfortunate. And that was also a miss. Like, you can see, like, every time you think you're in position, you just aren't. Okay, I'm going to need to start being pretty conservative with my energy usage here. Okay, I have to take a refill here. That's unfortunate. I just missed too many thrusts. This has not been a particularly good boss fight, but it shows like how demanding it is to get these central hits. There's really not a wide pixel window, and yeah, it's a big potential swing there. There's not too much time variance that I would expect to have in this game from like pure execution, but that boss fight is a big source of it. Despite the fact that that's the first boss fight in the game, it's probably the most technical boss fight in the game. So we vanquish the Immortal, but since it's an immortal being, just beating it into submission doesn't kill it. So she's still alive, and all we can do is subdue her right now, keep her inside the coffin. If we want to actually deal with her properly, we need to drag the coffin all the way back to town and purify it in what we call the pile driver, which you'll see in a short moment. But we get some plot first. We find the blacksmith who is investigating this seal below. This was keeping her sealed up and helping keep the ancestor piece sealed up. So, since these seals are breaking, this is like the main plot. The Immortals are going around trying to release these seals and unleash the ancestor piece on the world. And we get a nice little meow from Nero there, which I use as a cue to turn the light back on, since I'm not really going to have downtime to turn it on once we get into the coffin dragging. So I'm going to get back to the coffin. I'm going to unequip my armor and use a buff. There we go. So I'm going to use this buff so that we get 30 seconds of increased movement speed while dragging the coffin. And we first need to solve a puzzle before we can get back outside. I'm going to take it upstairs and go to this room that we have not been to yet. And now that I have a heavy object that I'm dragging with me, I can use it to hold down a floor panel, such as this one. And trigger all 3 of these to get into the treasure room here. I'm going to pick up a few things, including a key to get outside. And some crafting materials so that I can forge a new weapon when we get back to town, since we rescued the blacksmith and he's available to forge weapons for us. So we're going to do that so that we have a better weapon for the second dungeon. So now I'm going to drag the coffin all the way back to town manually. I'm going to use a second buff when this runs out. And this should last all the way back to town now, assuming I make no movement mistakes, such as that. Wasting like already a second there from accidentally doing a spear thrust, but it's fine. This should still last pretty much all the way back to town. You'll get a slight bit of time to see what the movement speed reduction is when you do not have this buff. But there's only going to be a few seconds of unbuffed movement before reaching the pile driver. If there's any point in the game where you want to try and have optimal movement, it's definitely during these segments when you have a temporary movement speed buff. It's compound time loss to have movement mistakes during these segments. But rounding the corners pretty nicely, not too bad. So now we get back to the pile driver, and Otenko is going to summon the pile driver here. So this is the nice big device that we're going to use to purify the immortals. We're going to summon 4 huge mirrors in these corners. I'm going to turn 3 of them on to start the purification, and then turn the last one on during the purification to skip a cutscene. And during these purification segments, your damage is a direct product of how many generators are online and the sun level. So having max sunlight here, which like I say, in normal circumstances is not really possible, it causes the immortals to die extremely quickly during purification. That's very nice to be able to get it back in the coffin that quickly. That's more or less as well as the purification can go. So what's my pace going to be here? 24:07 ending the purification. So considering how bad the fight was with Dunair, a good Dunair fight would have been a high 23, but still to have a 24:07 there, for the any percent run, I'm currently in the region of 20 to 30 seconds ahead of world record, so that's not too bad. There's a couple of pickups that I skipped because I'm not doing the full any percent route, but still I'm a little ahead of where world record would be right now, partly because of using the agility upgrade route instead of the strength upgrade route. That equalizes at this next dungeon of the game, where after putting in my stats, I'm going to equalize at what the old route would have been. So I'm not going to be gaining time from having higher agility anymore, but you just get the agility gain from moving faster through the entire cathedral. So we're going to come now into my favorite split, the blacksmithing split. So I said I'm going to forge a new weapon. So using the trash weapons that we found in the cathedral, I'm going to use the hammer and the spear to forge a sword. And it can give me one of 2 weapons. It can give me either the weapon that I already have equipped or a higher tier of sword. Unfortunately, the higher tier of sword is only roughly a 20% chance to happen, and I've got more or less an 80% chance to get the weapon I currently have. And if that happens, I need to use the weapon that I'm going to gain to do a second forge, because once I'm able to do a forge with 2 swords, that guarantees that I'll get a higher tier sword, but it still is going to lose in the region of 50 seconds to need to do a second forge. So this is, if you're going for PBs in this category, this is the major reset point, where this is, you just have an 80% chance to need to reset here because you can lose nearly a minute here. So I need to get these hits as central as possible, and I'm also using only partial sun exposure to make this cursor slower and a bit easier to work with. I'm also going to do 25 hits. I'm going to stop after 25, because the mathematical formula for determining the quality of your weapon, you actually get worse results if you go over 25 total hits. I don't know why, but you do. So if I get a blue sword, that's the worst weapon. If I get an orange sword, that's the good weapon, and this is a potential PB pace run if I get an orange sword here. No, alright, so I've got to do a second forge, just no 2 ways about it. So like I say, if I was just sitting going for PBs at home, that would be a reset right there to get a blue sword like that. You just can't really do anything about it. So another forge. So Huds, if there's anything you want to say, now is a very good time for it.
No worries, Draco. RNG's is not falling on your side this time. Just a reminder, we are raising money for Make-A-Wish. They are a fantastic charity granting wishes to critically ill children around the world. Last year, they actually granted more than 27,000 wishes globally, and it's your money, your donations that can really help them in terms of giving out their vision of granting a wish to every single child that wants one. So yeah, please keep your donations coming in. !donate in the chat.
Yeah, please do. It's such a great cause. And that was such a great forge as well. I did actually pretty well in that second round. Getting the great hits in the center, 22 greats and 3 goods. The great hits are a maximum of a 3-frame window, depending on how fast the cursor is going. So yeah, it's not super easy to get the great hits, but it does give you a better quality weapon. So we're going to put sword and soul on here. I'm going to, once I enter the second dungeon here, the remains, I'm going to take a health refill, because I'm going to need to take a health refill at some point anyway. And the next trap that I'm going to walk into is extremely dangerous. It's just going to be a bunch of purple bats that fly towards me, but the purple bats are grossly overpowered for this point if you don't have any armor on. I have 100 total HP, and they deal 55 damage per hit, and you don't really have iframes in this game, so it's very easy to take 2 back-to-back hits and die very quickly here, so let's hope I don't get hit here. I'm just going to move in a certain way to try and control them. Okay, that's not too bad. So I'm going to put my new weapon on now. There we go. And, oh, I don't want the enchantment on for hitting these slimes. These slimes have massive elemental resistance, so you actually want to hit them with no enchant. Also put all my remaining stat points into strength. So since I did the health refill earlier, I don't need to do it now. You do want to be full health before you go into this next room. There's going to be some narrow passageways and some flame jets. I'm going to take 2 damage boosts going through these flames, one on the way through and one on the way back, using flame and sword to light up these torches so that we can progress further. Wait for this flame jet and progress through. Also, these ledges, they are just sheer cliffs. If you fall off the ledge or if you brush against the edge of the ledge, you just fall straight off and you die instantly. There's no, like, safety mechanic there. Also, this is Kid. He's a shopkeeper in the town who is trying to search for, like, merchandise for his shop in these ruins. So come to, yeah, this dangerous place. I mean, it is full of treasure, I guess. Also gives us Enchant Frost, which is going to be nice for some puzzles later. I'm turning the light on, but I'm keeping the DS out of the light stream until I get back through this room, because there is solar wind in this room, which the stronger the sun is, the stronger the wind is, and it blows you in random directions. So, like, if you were going to task this game, you could probably actually use the solar wind to your advantage, but in RTA, having solar wind in that room just means you die instantly, because it just pushes you off. So that's not ideal. Taking a health refill as we come out there, and use Frost to get rid of that flame and those enemies. Switch to Fire here is going to be the next element that I'm going to need for this next room with a huge ice cube. Pick up this one pickup and switch to Frost. For the next room, I'm going to need to freeze this block to make it fall on the switch and refill my energy before we go into this mini-boss, the sword. So I'm going to get 10 hits on it before it charges at me, then back off and keep swinging at it. Two more hits to finish it off as it teleports back in. Move into the second room with some slimes. Now this room is not too bad, but the third room with the golems is my least favorite room in this run. The golems are awful. Like, the way they behave is like it's frame based. I'm gonna knock on the wall to try and distract them and have them roll around into each other, but like, it's so precise to get them to behave consistently. I just can't get them to behave consistently, and just we'll see how this goes. This can go like one of a million ways. Okay, that's fine. That is not really fine. I'm going to need to do another wall knock here. And that's also kind of not fine. Yeah, the way that they can bounce off each other is really erratic, but not an ideal second group, but at least I didn't die, and at least I was able to get all of the kills. Since they damage each other when they roll into each other, it's possible that they can kill each other, and that prevents you from getting the experience, which is a bit of a problem because experience in this dungeon is routed pretty strictly so that we reach level 10 before the boss fight. So here we have Django's edgy brother, and that's not even a joke. Like, Sabata is literally Django's brother, where Django is the solar child and Sabata is the lunar child, using the power of the moon and darkness instead. So Sabata's going to give us Enchant Cloud, which is going to be used for block breaking later and block pushing. And we're going to turn the lamp back on as we're going to go back outside just now and get a bit of passive regen as we go through here and do a bit of a manual recharge before going back indoors here. Fill to roughly 70%. I'm going to use another power nut here so I can solve this puzzle more quickly. So I've got to push these colored blocks onto the respective floor panels. Got to push this one all the way through so I can get behind it and push it back into the center of the room. Now there's going to be a bit of rapid fire menuing for this next puzzle. Cloud and sword, cloud and spear, frost and sword, cloud and sword. Cloud is the only element that's capable of breaking stone blocks. which we're about to loop back around. This room that I'm in now is where we met Kid and got Enchant Frost, but if we go through here, there's a stone block in the corner, which I need Enchant Cloud to be able to bypass, so that's why we're taking a bit of a roundabout path. Also, menuing, nice. I'm really bad. Select Flame, but don't have it selected. There we go. So kill this slime on the corner, just using the corner to force them to break apart in a favorable way, whilst they don't get a chance to run into me. Very nice. Pushing that block so that we have something to push as we go downstairs here. Going to turn my enchant on and turn the sunlight off. This is the block we just pushed down, so we can go a little deeper into the dungeon now. Now in this next room, you want the sun off because these floor panels will trigger otherwise and summon these skeletons. Going to pick up a speed nut here, which I'm going to save for later. Use another power nut in this room where we had 2 colored blocks now. 2 colored blocks before, now we have 4 colored blocks. And if this puzzle looks a little confusing, it's like, this is pretty confusing. If you come here casually the first time, like, I mean, I don't remember what my casual experience was like as a kid, like 15 to 20 years ago playing this game, but I imagine this puzzle took me a while to figure out. It's a little bit of a puzzle. And like I say, if you want to play this game casually, you're going to have to get used to doing a lot of block pushing puzzles like this. So turning on the sun again, and I really like the sound effect of these mummies. That's just a nice sound effect. I really like it. Like, MGS would be even more fun if the guards, instead of like the, you know, the exclamation mark sound effect, if they just went as they found you. That would be really good. So we're going to set this mummy on fire here, and it's going to run into this lamp in the corner to unlock the door in the south, but I'm going to go outdoors first and get another key so I can go deeper into the dungeon. I'm going to also damage boost off this one northwards, and again on the return path, save a little bit of time. 7 is thankfully a very negligible amount of damage to take at this point. Go back indoors, select Sol, and I'm going to turn the sun off here and put my stat points in after I push this block. And we're going to come into the axe, which is the next mini-boss. Now, if it behaves, it's going to be a very quick fight, but it is pseudo-random what it decides to do on its second attack cycle, so we'll see what we get. That's not what you want to see. Dickhead. Alright, so yeah, it's just random whether you get that red spinning attack, and that's the worst thing that it can do, but whatever. I'm still alive, that's the main thing, and I still have enough energy with Cloud to kill this golem in the next room, which is going to get me to level 10. So now my EXP is fine for going into the boss fight. I'm going to turn the sun on as I'm going to go back outside here, and we get to the other big RNG swing screen of the run. First, I'm going to refill my health. So now I'm going to come into the desert here, and there's a grid here with like 8 screens surrounding the central screen. I need to find 3 stone tablets, which are on random screens in various spots. So I didn't find the first one in the most optimal spot. Didn't find the second one in the second best spot. Okay, that's the first one. Whoops, I need, please, spear. There we go. All right. I'm going to stand here and use the spear to take care of these bats. Didn't get that one either. This is pretty terrible RNG so far, but the thing about this segment is it really doesn't matter how quickly you find the first 2 stone tablets. It only matters when you find the last one. So if the last one is in the worst possible spot, like I say, it doesn't matter if you find the first 2 in the 2 best spots if you still need to make the full circuit. And I am making the full circuit. Nice. This happens like more commonly than it should, statistically, in my opinion. Like, I don't know if these are actually equal probability for all segments, but it certainly doesn't feel like it. It feels like I get that last spot more often than not. Or maybe that's just me coping, I don't know. Either way, we summon the remains in the center here, and we're going to get to go inside, which is where the next immortal is. And I'm going to get a hidden chest in the corner here, which is going to have another power nut, which I'm going to need for Sabata later. Please, corners are hard. And now in this room I need to do the 4 torches in a specific order to open the staircase. Now since I'm level 10, I'm going to get to skip all of the combat here. If I wasn't level 10, I would kill the next golem that I'm going to run into, but instead I'm just going to run through it just to save a bit of time. And there's 4 puzzles that I'm going to need to do here with different elements and different weapons. So I'm going to need to push this block first, push this block onto the switch. Now push this second block onto the one in the other corner, then use Frost to drop them onto the switches. I've got just enough energy left to solve the second puzzle, then I'll take a recharge on the solar station. Need flame, yeah, bleh. Alright, menuing's hard. Use flame to first heat up this block, and then use cloud to push it into position. So I'm going to put my stat points in now. Use my speed nut, and I'm going to recharge on the solar station here. So I've got 30 seconds of maximum movement speed. This should last me all the way into the boss room, after which movement speed is not super relevant. So I only need 50% energy to get by here. So this puzzle is a nice make every floor panel the same color. Again, first time you play this game, if this looks confusing, it is a little confusing, but the solution makes sense once you've grinded it a bit and looked at it objectively. But when you first come to that, it's like, oh my god, what am I doing? It's like, it's something. So now the final room is going to have wind pushing me in a random direction. That's a pretty good direction though, to hit that switch, and now just walk onto the floor switch to open the door to the end, and we're going to run into the Immortals room. So this is going to be the last boss fight of the run. There's going to be a bit of gameplay after the boss fight, but this is the last big boss encounter that we're going to walk into, and it's going to be the vampire from the start of the game, which stole our solar gun, so we can presumably finally get our solar gun back, right? Unfortunately, it's not going to go so simply. As we come into here and find the vampire, he's not like hostile at first, but then he starts getting influenced by Blacksmithing, the like big mastermind, the main antagonist of the story, who then kidnaps Otenko, so we're completely defenseless against this vampire now. Sabata's going to come in and stop us from immediately dying, and this is a fight where it's both Django and Sabata working together to subdue this vampire. So you can't just go in and attack this guy. If you try and attack the vampire, he'll always dodge and counterattack. So Sabata's going to be in the center, constructing these black holes with his gun, the Gun del Hell, the dark gun. So the first phase of the fight is about protecting Sabata. You just want to misdirect this guy's attacks away from Sabata. He's now going to try to directly attack Sabata, so I need to protect him. Now he's going to use the gun from a random direction, and we're going to push him into the black hole here. Give him 5 good ones. So his health is like at halfway now. If this second phase goes normally, this will be a 2-phase encounter, but I don't know exactly why, but this can become a 3-phase encounter. Like when you're about to deal the last hit, he can break out of the black hole and cause a 3rd cycle, which wastes a lot of time. I don't know exactly what controls it. Health seems to be a component, but sometimes it just seems to happen on its own as well. So I'm just hoping that it's not going to happen here. Okay, good. Standard 2-cycle fight. That's, I've lost PB pace runs to that before. So now Django goes to deal the final blow, but once they get a look at this guy's face, like, oh no, it's our father, and then, glomp. Best part of the run. Getting glomped. So Django gets bitten, and now is starting transformation into vampire status, because, you know, he couldn't bring himself to attack his father once getting a good look at his face. That also explains why the vampire was able to use the solar gun, since it's restricted to the solar child bloodline. So now Sabata, all he can do is summon the coffin to subdue Django for a bit, and we need to drag Django all the way back to town and do the purification as Sabata. So I've got 2 power nuts left, which I'm going to use to get 60 seconds of buff time, which is going to be enough to get all the way back to town. I'm going to take a specific route through the desert to cut out a little bit of travel time. The way that the screen transitions in the desert work is a little different to the rest of the game. It's very hard to explain, but it makes more sense when you look at a map. You can basically like partially teleport through some of these screens, depending on like where you do the screen transition. It's difficult to explain offhand. But I'm going to get back in, and I'm going to reach the desert, and then I'm going to take the down left exit, and I'm going to take 7 steps on this screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Transition to left. That's going to make me go up left off the screen. Now down left is going to do an instant screen transition. Now my buff's going to run out, and I'm going to re-up it. So this 30 seconds of buff should last me all the way back to town from where I am now. The only real source of randomness left in the run is on the second last screen. There are bats on the walls that can be in random spots, and if they are close to Sabata, they become hostile and start attacking you. And since Sabata only has the Gun del Hell, a gun that just fires dark blobs in one of 8 directions, even though that's extremely powerful, it's not necessarily good at dealing with moving flying targets that are moving like semi-randomly. So you kind of just hope that the bats do not aggro onto you. It's not this screen. These bats will always aggro, but you are fast enough to go past them. It's this next screen with the black bats. And okay, that should be far enough to dodge it. Yeah, fine. So if they're a little closer than that, they can just immediately start attacking you, and it's not a very good time, especially when you have this temporary buff. Thankfully, we're back to town now. I'm going to turn the sun on, and we need to do the purification, after which it's going to be time. This is only a partial game category. So Sabata, being the Lunar Child, kind of like the Immortals, he doesn't deal well with sunlight. Sabata takes constant damage from sunlight when it's out, and we're using the maximum sunlight here. So this purification is actually a damage race to purify Django before Sabata dies. Oh, please. Okay, so I'm turning on 2 generators to start the purification. Sabata can knock them online with 1 hit, so I'm going to turn on the second 2 once the purification starts. I'm going to teleport into the center first to get in position. Now going to the south to manipulate Django moving up to begin with. Now he's going to go to one of the random pile drivers. And now this is going to be Django dead, and time is when purification complete shows up here. That's time. So then, like I say, this is a partial game category. The game carries on, and then, oh no, you were only half successful in purifying Django. You're now partially a vampire, and Sabata faints, and now you have to do the next leg of the game in a vampire form where you don't have any of your solar power, and it's a pretty interesting game. It's a pretty interesting run, and I will plan to submit the full any percent for a future marathon, but quite frankly, I was too scared to submit it this time. Any percent is a brutally difficult category, and I just wanted to also show a slightly shorter category for an audience that hasn't necessarily seen this series, this technology before, without forcing people to sit through a 2-hour any percent run, in which if you die during late game, it can be very possible to not be able to complete the game anymore. But either way, I'm super grateful for the opportunity to show Boktai finally to a large marathon audience. I feel really passionately about this game series, and I have a lot of faith in this as a speed game, so I'm going to be working very hard to get any percent in submittable status and hopefully show it off at a future event. I'd like to give some big thanks to ESA, obviously, for allowing me to showcase this. Shout outs to the Boktai speedrunning community. We're a pretty small community, but we're all very passionate about this game series. There's been a bit of a renaissance of activity in this game where we're working pretty hard on documenting like game data and like looking at the code and figuring out like how RNG works, so we can make some very nice optimizations and RNG manipulations for the full any percent run. And yeah, 2024 is going to be a pretty interesting year for this game. It's a bit unassuming, like you'd think, oh, this is a pretty like small, obscure game series, but there's a handful of us who are like very passionately working on pushing this game right now. So hopefully at a future event, I'm going to have something very special to show you guys. But until then, thank you very much for having me, and I'll let you guys get set up for the next run. Thank you so much.